You already have a name for what's wrong in your marriage. So did I. Mine was wrong for many years. Because when we can't explain that empty feeling, we don't sit in it. We reach for the closest thing that fits, and we hold on to it for dear life. The real one is still down there, and it's often closer to the surface than you actually think. It's usually the thing that you don't quite have the words for yet. For years, I was convinced that the problem between Esme and I was physical intimacy, and I believed it completely. I was the one who reached for her hand. I was the one who started the hug, the kiss, all of it, for the vast majority of our marriage. So when I finally sat her down and I told her exactly what I thought was wrong, that's what I named. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The emptiness I felt wasn't from a lack of physical intimacy. It was from not feeling chosen. But that belief did not come from nowhere. I had years of evidence to support it. If I reached for her hand, we would hold hands. If I didn't, then we wouldn't. If I started a hug, then we hugged. If I didn't, we would just pass right by each other. I could have handed you a spreadsheet, and any reasonable person looking at it would have probably come to the same conclusion that I did. And it turns out that that wasn't just me. There's a study out of Binghamton where they looked at 180 married couples, and on average, they found what I was feeling, that the husbands were less satisfied with physical affection in their marriage than their wives were. But interestingly enough, for the men specifically, it wasn't only about how much they were getting, it was also tangled up with the fear of being left, which is exactly it. I was never really counting hugs. I was reading them. Every one that didn't happen went into a case I was quietly building about whether or not I was wanted. So if you got a name for what's wrong in your house, you can test it, and it costs you virtually nothing. Just imagine that you have it, not some of it, all of it, starting tomorrow. Now check whether or not that hollow spot is gone. Because if you can picture getting exactly what you asked for, and you still feel that same emptiness, you've named the closest thing. You haven't quite found the true thing yet. And I actually did say the right word at one point. Somewhere along the way, I told her that I wanted to feel desired, which was close. And I still had no idea what I meant by that. Saying a thing and understanding it are really not the same thing at all. And sometimes it takes you many years to figure that out.
I'm Dan. I'm 39 years old, and for over 21 years, my wife Esme and I have been learning that great relationships aren't built through perfection. They're built through repair, intention, and the choice to keep showing up. This is where I reflect on the mistakes that we've made, the lessons that we've learned, and the life we're still building together. Join us as we continue our lifelong journey of practicing presence.
When I was in high school, my mom and I pulled into the driveway after an argument while we were out, and she had told me that I wasn't her family, that her real family was already living in Washington. We lived in LA at the time. And I don't remember being angry in that moment. I do remember being devastated, not because of what she said, but because of what it confirmed, an extra in my own life. So that groove was cut long before Esme ever got near to it. So one night, Esme and I are talking in bed, and everything is fine, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting for her to reach towards me, to come to me, to lead off. Because I had finally worked up the courage to say what I had needed a few days prior, and now some part of me wanted to see whether or not she would actually do it. And in the moment, I didn't call it a test. I would have told you that I was giving her space. But I have a whole video on this channel about setting a test for your partner that they don't know that they're taking. And here I was running one. I just couldn't see it in the moment because I was standing right in the middle of it. And of course, she doesn't come. The minutes go by and she still doesn't. And in that gap, the demons start to show up. And they're very good at their job. They tell me that she doesn't want me, that I'm a guest in my own home. And then they said, you're an extra in your own life. And that one really had a place to land. So she turns to me in the dark and she says, what's taking you so long? And she wasn't gentle about it. It came out as an accusation, and it certainly landed like one. And I said, well, I thought you were going to come to me. And that was it. There was no fight. Nobody called anybody a name. Nobody said you always. Nobody said you never. We turned away from each other and we stopped talking for 5 days. And those two silences, they may look identical from the outside, but they're certainly not the same thing. The one I ran before she said anything was aimed. It was a test. The 5 days that followed weren't a weapon. That was two people who had been hurt independently and had no idea what to do about it, withdrawing into the pain of their own existence. And she did reach out a couple days later by text. She did the single hardest thing that she was capable of doing in that moment, which was putting a feeling into words, but I couldn't receive it. I read it through my own pain and I heard an excuse. But love was never the problem, even during those 5 days, because there was plenty of love in the house. That's really what made the whole thing unbearable. Because we're each other's safe haven. We're each other's people. And if we can't talk to each other, then who the hell are we supposed to talk to? By day 4, I had been to church enough times to get my head above water. And I texted her that I had something long to say and I didn't want to drop it on her while she was at work. And so she suggested that we talk in person. In the moment, though, I felt like she was putting me off. But she was on the absolute outer edge of what she was capable of. And so when I came home that night, it was quite late, and she was already in bed, quiet, but she was awake. And I had that sense that she still wanted to talk, but I knew that she wasn't going to make the first move. So I had asked her, and of course she said yes. And we ended up talking for over an hour. And what I found out is that the thing that I had been reading as her not wanting me was actually guilt. She wanted to show me the intimacy that I needed. She's always wanted to. But what stood in the way was something that got broken in her when she was a child, long before I ever met her. Never hers to carry, but she was forced to anyways. Now the easy version of what happens next is that I just got lucky, but that's not quite right. Because weeks later, she told me something that I could not have possibly known in that moment. She said that the way that I handled the rest of that conversation made her feel completely safe. That she never once felt judged. She never felt a finger being pointed at her. That it was like I was actually curious about what was going on inside of her mind. And that's something that I've failed at for the vast majority of my adult life. But in the moment, what I actually did was take hold of my own pain and refuse to allow it to drive the conversation that I knew had to happen. Because I was in just as much pain as she was. But I wouldn't allow it to steer it. And that's not luck. That's a choice. And it's a choice that's available to you. You cannot make your partner face the thing that they've spent their life running from. That's fundamentally true. And anybody who tells you different is trying to sell you something. What you can do is make sure that they aren't alone when they try. Researchers actually have a name for this. They call it earned security. The idea that one relationship can go back and repair what an earlier one broke. She didn't stop being afraid that night. She stopped being afraid by herself. And that hour is where I finally understood I had the wrong word for what I was missing the whole time. Because I thought that I was missing the feeling of being desired. But desire is a feeling, and feelings show up on their own. You don't really get a vote. What I was actually missing was the feeling and the need of being chosen. You don't always control what you desire, but you can always control what you choose. Which is why it matters so much now that she was terrified and she reached for me anyways. She didn't wait for it to feel natural. When she comes now and she hangs on me, she's choosing me over her own fear on purpose in real time. And knowing what it costs her doesn't make it mean less. In fact, it makes it mean more. You know, the Bible says in Genesis, it's not good that a man should be alone. And that was true for Adam. And it's certainly true for me. Neither Esme nor I were handed all of the tools independently. She has what I'm missing. I have what she's missing. That's kind of the arrangement. We're meant to cover the weak places in each other so that neither one of us has to ever walk up and do the hard thing by ourselves. But that really only holds if we keep choosing it. Deliberately and consistently, because the second we stop, the drift sets in, and neither of us would notice it until we're 5 days into silence, wondering how we ended up there. So what have you named? And when's the last time you actually checked on whether it was true? Don't tell me. Tell the person you're married to. If this was worth your time, subscribing genuinely helps. And if you want the other half of this story, how the distance gets in there in the first place, go watch The Distance in Your Marriage Started Years Ago next. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.